The grand return of Annoyatron, and Bob, I wish it would end right now.
So this guy doesn't have a sword or anything? He's just, like, annoying?
Like looking in a mirror, isn't it, Bob?
Oh, this doesn't look good.
Like you in a mirror?
That's Hearthstone.
Play it
All
free.
right. Now, we're going to see if this
This guy doesn't
works.
have a sword or anything? He's just, like, annoying?
Like
We're
looking in
going
a
to see
mirror,
if this
isn't it, Bob?
works.
Oh, this doesn't look good.
As you can
Like
tell,
you in a mirror?
I am
That's
not all that
Hearthstone.
comfortable
Play
with
it
this. Not the most Now, familiar with it we're either. going to see if
This
this
guy doesn't have a
works.
sword or anything? He's just, like, annoying?
Like
We're
looking
going
in
to
a
see
mirror,
if this
isn't it, Bob?
works.
Oh, this doesn't look good.
There we go. Okay, not exactly sure what was up with that, but hey, if it's working, that's all that matters. So, let me introduce myself one more time. Name is Blood Saint. It's a long story as to why I have that name. Basically, it's an old idea for a storyline I had. But to be perfectly honest with you, that can be a tale for another day. Thank you for joining me for Fun with Maya. For a project I am currently engaged in, I figured, well, if I'm going to be modeling assets for it, might as well do it online. If nothing else, may inspire someone who's doing something similar to get into it. May be able to help someone who is doing something similar. Who knows? Might even convince someone who's on the fence about whether or not they want to get into this sort of thing. Maybe it'll give them a chance to see what it entails, and then let them decide one way or the other from there. Today, I am basically creating weapon assets. Oh, I so hate the over-parenting nature of this. Creating weapon assets for enemy characters within the actual, well, I'm gonna just come out and say it, game I'm currently engaged in working on. As you can tell, it's got kind of a old medieval Japanese sort of theme to it. Yeah, if you actually knew who I was, then you'd see how that is a little odd. Bit on the weird nature, but, you know, I've never been normal. You can ask my mother that. I passed. Anyway, so, as you can see, I should probably start from the very beginning. I started off with a standard cylinder. If you buy Maya LT or even get the actual legit full version of Maya, that's going to be the cylinder tool right up here. Creates a default for you. I essentially shrunk it down to get roughly the width of what was drawn out. I then stretched it out and dropped the actual center down because, in all legitimacy, it doesn't need to be perfectly round. In reality, I don't believe it should be. Well, actually, it should probably be a little rounder, but, you know. Actually, yeah, we'll make it a little rounder. If you're going to be a modeler, one thing you definitely want to do, reference. Reference is going to be key. You don't want to just draw stuff out, generally. And as you can see, the reference I have, it's rough, very rough. I'm not the best artist, but I get essentially the feeling that I'm going for. Now, from this point, we're going to work on the actual Suba part here. So, what we are essentially going to do, we're going to start grabbing faces. Basically, faces are the sides of whatever model you're working with. Now, there are two ways we could go around it. One, we could tell it to expand, drawing this out to the side, to this general size, and then push forward. After, re-extrude it again to push forward. Or, we just extrude here. If you click this, that'll put you right in the center of the overall space, which is usually what I prefer to do. Keeps things a little more uniform and it's a lot more predictable. Right now, we are then going to spread this out to the height that it should be roughly. Actually, that's probably a bit too far. We'll do to here. Then from this point, bada boom, bada bing, we grab this. Hit extrude one more time. Here, you don't necessarily need to go center, because when you press out, Going to keep everything roughly uniform for the distance you're trying to go for. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but then you can just angle it and change it any way you need to. And then when I actually go into detail it, I will split this a couple of ways down the center. Draw the center. Well, you know what? Why not just do it? Now, if you're working with my LT, there's a nice little function they've added in where it automatically creates cylinder, well, all the way around divots. I am not good at public speaking. You'll get to learn that very quickly. But essentially, as opposed to having to go line by line by line by line like you used to have to do, you can now just hit Control, and it automatically, for anything that would fit along that purpose, automatically drop in as straight line for you. It comes in extremely handy, especially when time is of the essence. So now at this point, we're just going to change camera views over to top. Grab these in the center. Then we're just going to scale them out a little. Gives a little more definition, nothing too major, nothing too finite. I may change it in the future, may keep it the way it is, may improve, may reduce. And honestly, looking at it, seems a bit short. Oh, actually seems a bit tall for me. So, I'm going to switch this back over to the vertex. Jump back to the top view. Bada boom, bada bing. Dropping it down. Now, I would just like to point out I am in no way a professional. I am essentially what you would consider a hobbyist. Just a guy that likes playing with models. And for whatever reason, not quite sure why the computer did that, but hey, here we go. I'm pretty sure you couldn't notice that, but for some reason, it minimized my window. And I don't know why. I'm not even going to lie to you folks. I have no idea why. Now, we're trying to keep this all as one generalized model. Technically, I could do several models, several geometry models of sorts, and then combine them together, much like you would do with a real weapon. But, I'd prefer not to do that. And as of right now, I want to try and work on this point. I can't remember the proper name for it, but the section where the blade is held into the hilt. And how am I going to do that, you may be wondering? Simple. We're just going to grab these 2 points, scale them in a bit. Then we're going to extend out to these other 2 points, and we'll scale them in further. And then we're going to use these 2 endpoints to essentially close off the box. Now, if you're working in Maya and you feel that your image plane is in your way, you can just get rid of it. It'll still be there. It's just not visible to the camera you're looking in. Point in case. Ta-da. If you're familiar with Maya, this is nothing mind-blowing. If you're unfamiliar with Maya, this may be something you were concerned about at some point. And one thing that I typically enjoy doing is having 2 different perspectives. Like this one, I really don't need the side, so I'll turn this into the other perspective. And we will change this to not have the image plane. This way, I can work freely in this one, and then jump over to here if for whatever reason I want to go back to the reference. Now, here's where a couple of decisions need to be made. I can extrude these faces out. Extrusion is what I did earlier, where I grabbed the faces here and then pulled them forward. That's extrusion. Nothing major, simple thing. However, I essentially need to come up with the idea, well, not come up with, but need to figure out, do I want to keep these lines they could come in handy, and it'll save us on having to recreate them if need be. Or do I get rid of them, and then just gives me a cleaner geometric shape that I can then work on and mold and sculpt a little bit better for me. That's how I typically work, but keep in mind when it comes to models, it's really more what you're comfortable with. I know there are definitive, yes, things to do and no things to do, but quite frankly, if it gets the job done, if it looks nice, and at the end of the day, it keeps your geometry nice and clean, I'll put in a little more work. But I want to get this squared off a little better. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get all 4 done today. Probably not. Honestly, don't even know if anyone is going to find this even remotely interesting. But hey, it's the world of tomorrow, technically. Oh. Yeah, one thing you will notice about Maya, it has a tendency to... what's a good way to say this? It has a tendency to run wild when you try and move the camera. I don't know if it's because of my mouse, or if it's just something with my LT, but it is something to be aware of. Now, right now, I'm extending out the controls for the scale, trying to get the sides to be as squared off as possible. Nothing major. Again, simple trick you can do. But in case you happen to be wondering, that's what I'm doing. Now, we're going to turn this into this. You're probably wondering how exactly? Extrusion. There we go. I'm going to drag this forward a little bit. Now this will give us a nice secure point for the blade to come out of. You know what? I'm going to drop down to you for a moment. There we go. So, right now, we've got a good staff going. Got the central point that holds in the blade. Honestly, I'm going to drop one of our lines back in. And again, like I said, this is my process. If it helps you, fantastic. If not, maybe you get a good laugh out of it. And another thing I'm going to do, add this line back in. Now another nice thing I'm really digging, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm really digging from the new Maya, is it gives you this ability to control significantly better where you're dropping in points. Unfortunately, unlike the old version, you could choose if you wanted it to be at intervals. This, it's just once you hold down the button, it is literally at a integer of 10. That's not what I wanted. That's what I wanted. There we go. Now, remember what I was saying earlier about when you add in, it does weird things like that. So, since it gives you a preview, if you're fine with what it's doing, go ahead. But I'm just going to add a line going straight across like so. Alright, and sometimes the system just works weird. That's been an issue with Maya for as long as I've known Maya has existed. So, if it does something weird, don't fret. It's a lot more common than you think. Now, one thing I will point out, blades have ends. So we're going to need to take this, move to there. Actually, no, that's a little too far. So we're going to do like so. And then there. Now, you're probably thinking this is a huge jumbled mess that I'm working on right now. And to a degree, you're probably right. But there is a method to the madness, and hopefully I'll be able to show that without looking like a complete loon. Though then again, if you actually knew me, you'd realize this is the most coherent I've been in a very long time. So, we're just going to, yep, figured that was going to happen. There we go. Drop that to there. Move this to here. And done. Now, we've got a good point in which we can start extruding out the blade itself. They'll give us a nice refined point to it as well. And then we'll be able to work on this section after that. But first, switch back to our perspective camera that's got the image plane to it. Extrude this sucker out. Bada boom, bada bing. And we'll actually extrude out to about here. And there's a reason as to why we're not going the full length right now. Anytime you wind up in a situation where the camera seems to be repositioning itself in a weird way, just hit F, brings you right to whatever you've got selected. Now, one more thing that I think we need to do. We're going to switch back to vertex. Grab here, and now, as you can see, we've got more of a point going. But you're probably noticing this is a lot more squared than what we've got here. Again, not a problem. Move back without the camera. A little bit of refining, a little bit of sculpting. Bada boom, bada bing. Forget about it. Now, you're probably noticing we need more of a refined edge carrying on through here. And in that, I got you covered. I really do enjoy working in Maya. It's something therapeutic, just taking random objects and turning them into something. Then again, I could just be crazy. Probably just crazy. Alright. So there we go. Now, one thing we are definitely going to do, get rid of these edges because they are unneeded. We are going to switch back to the vertexes now that we have those edges gone. Pull them out a bit. Looks a little more uniform. And we got close to the curvature of what was drawn out before. It's, oh, wrong one. It's pretty close. Not exact, not perfect, but it's doable. One thing we could do to shape it up a little more, pull this back a bit. Pull this up slightly. I think that should work out a bit better. Now, remember those lines we took out? We're actually going to add them back in. You're probably wondering why I did that, and to be completely honest with you, I'm not thinking too much into this. I'm just sort of going with the flow. But the main reason is we need this edge to not be floating. But at the same time, we're going to detail the back a bit, which is honestly just, it's more of a vanity thing, really. So we're going to pull these forward a bit, give it a slight arc. Technically, may not look too bad to move these up a bit as well. Like, if you're working on Maya, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't think that you're overdoing it or anything to that effect. Sometimes you need to make a mistake. Sometimes you need to screw something up. It's going to happen. Let's be completely honest. It's going to happen. Why? Because we're human. We get new ideas constantly. Now, one thing I am going to say is if you ever feel that you're moving in the wrong direction, that's perfectly fine. Take the time, review what you're doing, and if it all comes down to it, hey, if you need to redo something, redo it. Now, we've got the blade, but you know what? I do want to spread this out a bit. We're going to make it a little bigger. Simple thing to do. Bada boom, bada bing. Gives us a little more width. Gives us a little more weight. And if we really want it, we could add some curvature to it. But we'll hold off on that for now. Until we see what the overall poly count for the end of this is, at the end of this is, let's not push our luck, shall we say. So, here we are. Now, this is something I'm going to be completely honest with you with. These lines, we're not going to need them. They're just going to get in the way and increase our poly count unnecessarily. So we're going to drop them out. Just make this a much cleaner, much more useful, basically going to make a much cleaner, much more useful model. Sorry, that was my phone. So, again, I'm going to pull this out. Now, you're probably wondering what the purpose of this is. Basically, the ends of these staffs are weighted. So these are essentially just giant weights. And bada boom, bada bing. Screwed it out a bit. Maybe a little more. There we go. Okay. Now, one thing I am going to point out. If you're going to use this, if you're going to use the extrusion tool by it just being centered at the face, you most likely don't want to use the red or green axes. Stick to the blue. This is why. You're going to get weird geometric things if you use those. Now, if that's what you're going for, okay. But otherwise, probably not going to be the best for you. Another little tip to throw into this. So, now that we got that face, going to expand on it slightly. And now, extrude one more time. Straight down. And this one, do the exact same thing. And we don't want this to be an exact replica of the top side. So, we're going to move down to F. We're going to move down to here. And looking at it, a little lower, a little smaller. And yeah, that is essentially, that's our Naginata. So, that's what, half an hour took us to make that? So now, we've got a poly count for this one item of 147. You know what? We can add some curvature to it. Add a little more life to the blade. Make it a little more scenic. A little less rustic. We can definitely do some stuff with it. Now, here's where we're going off script a little bit. And technically, while we're at it, we can go ahead and pull this down a bit. Anytime you work in a program like this, there's going to be some cleanup, just so you're aware. But here we go. Now, we're going to add a small curve to it. And after we drop in the lines, you know what? Important thing that I have completely forgotten about, gotta save it. So, what I'm going to do right now is save this. And if you wind up working in Maya, something you need to know, saving is your friend. Maya has a huge tendency to just randomly shut down. You need to save a lot. Could be my computer, but generally, I believe it's Maya, because my computer runs other programs just fine. So, another thing you can do, you can duplicate whatever you're working on. That way, if you like what changes you make, you can keep the new one. If you don't like the changes, you've got the original to fall back on. So, saving and duplicates can actually save you a lot of hassle. All right. Here we are. You know what? Let's see what happens when we pull the whole thing forward. Ah, looks like it did not get that center line. Always want to keep an eye on what you're doing, just in case Maya decides to go rogue. So, there we go. And as I've pointed out before, I am not good with public speaking. I usually do this just watching something on TV or listening to something while I'm working. Matter of fact, earlier today, went to go see the new Ant-Man movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Very good movie. Extremely good movie. But wait till the end credits. Trust me, you do not want to leave until after the actual credits have run. A certain gentleman who happens to wear a certain flag for a certain nation shows up with another gentleman who happens to be quite aromatic. It sets things up for future movies pretty well, in my opinion. Now, as you can see, this curve not really working. But in this failure, we now know that it doesn't look as well as we were kind of hoping it would. Maybe something to look into a little bit better down the line. However, in making those changes to the duplicate, not the original is still fully intact. So, way to go, us. And this entire model made out of one polygon. You know what? I think I've been doing this for a decent amount of time, but I kind of want to go ahead and work on, I don't know. Let's do the spear. Let's do the spear next. Why not? So, just like before, I'm going to drop in another cylinder. I'm going to kick this sucker down to 8. I'm going to get her centered right into the middle here as best as possible. Reduce this sucker down. I'm going to hit F just to keep a good eye on it, because that's super important. It actually isn't. I just like doing it. And we got the relative width of it good. So, kick this over to 90. Now we're going to stretch this sucker out. You know what? These are your controls. These are basically manuals you can use. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. Nope, that's the one I wanted. There we go. You can use those as well. It's all personal preference. I prefer using the actual manipulators. But sometimes you do get the little, hey, are you sure you want to use such and such message? And yes, I want to use that. Otherwise, I would not have done that. Or if I hadn't wanted to do that, I would have just, deleted it or stepped backwards. Either way, both were fully viable options that I was fully aware of. But again, I digress. So, here we are. As you can see, this is going to have a weighted end as well. But we want to focus in mostly on this up here. This is going to be a little tricky. Not too much so. We got the basic skills down. If you've seen what I did earlier, you'll know essentially where this is going. So, we're going to push this down a little bit. We're going to switch over to faces. Now, we have a couple of options. Imagine each of these sections as just what we've done before. Just extrude out and then expand on like we did with the actual Suba here. We could do that with these two ends and then just stretch this out. Would be super easy to do. So actually, that's most likely what I'm going to do. And you're probably wondering why I'm going to do it that way. Well, one, ease and simplicity. Two, well, be perfectly honest with you, when you're working on a bunch of models, you want to go for speed as well as quality. And three, it's a new technique. Well, it's a technique I'm showing everyone, so we might as well show how versatile and useful it is, right? Am I right? Am I right? I'm right. Am I right? I'm right. Okay. Sorry about that. Can't promise it won't happen again. Either way. And yes, we are actually in faces already, so that was pointless of me to do. Whatever. We're here. And we're completely selected. Now, just like we did before, we're going to stretch this sucker out. Now, for this bottom one, we're going to do, essentially, we're going to leave it squished in more of an oval shape. For this top one, we're going to go more more circular, so it will be more rounded. And it's not going to be perfectly round, but it'll be more round than what it is currently. And that I did not want to press at all. But that is why we have the step back tool. Yep. Going to kick over to this one. And now we're going to hit the center. Yeah, that looks a little more rounded. Now, in a situation like this, if you're questioning if something is round or not, hit your cylinder tool, grab another cylinder. If you hit the insert button and then hit V, you're able to snap whatever you've got selected 2 points. Oh, also, when you're working in Maya, hit shading, wireframe on shading. Helps the little details like this stick out a little more. So then we just go here. Turn this sucker 90 or so degrees. Reduce it down. And this gives you the relative circular shape rather, of whatever you're trying to do. Now, all you gotta do, stretch it out. This, my friends, would be what you call a ta-da moment. But I was actually pretty close before. I'm actually very, very surprised. But while I could, toot my own horn on that, I think I'm just going to move on. So, since that was no longer needed, we deleted it. It's gone. It's done with. It's out of here. Now, the next thing we're going to do, first, kick back to up here. Now, whenever you hit the shading, wireframe on shading, you have to do it for each individual window you want to work in. Now, for this, we want to take these inside points and we're going to move them out a bit. Because again, we're trying to work with one particular shape to create the entire item. And this should be, this should be about what we're talking about and what we're looking for. Now, here's where things going to get a little fun. And when I say fun, I mean super devious, super annoying to try and figure out. But again, this is what my art department came up with. Granted, I am my art department, but this is what my art department came up with. This is what we gotta do. Now, we're going to extrude this forward. Try and get the overall shape here. And now we need to figure out the best way to get this sort of M-looking shape out of this. Now, what I'm imagining right now is if we take this angle here, drop some lines in right through these two faces and these two faces, we can then stretch those lines forward. However, one thing we are going to do, we're going to pull this back a bit, and then we're going to do a small extrusion forward. And you'll see why in a moment. So, just like we thought about before, we're going to drop this. And I don't know why, I just prefer working in vertexes. I'm going to drop this. Move this over to the 60. Now remember, when you're working in Maya, the numbers you're working with don't necessarily coincide with each side. It all depends on how you set up your model. It's a weird thing. So, we got those. Now, we're going to pull these edges forward. That's about the right length. Gonna pull them closer together. And we're gonna pull them down. Now, had we not created this second extrusion point, this second extrusionary area, sort of boundary type area here, we'd be messing up this overall shape. Since we're trying to mimic this, it was actually quite necessary to have that there. And we're grabbing the center points too, Because in all honesty, you could leave them where they are, and it may look nicer to you in the future. But if you're working on something like this, it comes down to what you feel it should look like. There really isn't a reason to move it or not to move it. It basically falls down to personal preference. Now, we need to start working on the blade. And this, if you've ever seen the movie, what was it, Black Sheep? To quote Chris Farley, wow, I am losing all ability to speak today. I have a plan. I just need someone like David Spade to go, yikes, and that would have been a nowhere near timely reference. I'm not going to lie. I'd actually be very surprised if a whole lot of people remember who Chris Farley was. Which is actually very, very sad, because he was a hilarious man. Loved him on Saturday Night Live. The bulk of the reason for me to stop watching the show, the bulk of the reason for me to watch the show was Chris Farley. The bulk of the reason of me no longer to watch the show was it just got really bad. I heard it's doing better now, but honestly, I couldn't care less. Eventually, after Chris Farley died, I got more into Mad TV, and then it got canceled. All of the things I love seem to disappear. Good thing we got a new Dragon Ball series. So, we're going to grab that center point. Going to pull it up to about here. And again, we're going to move back. And we're just trying to create the overall shape. Don't think you're going to get it perfect the first go around. We're just trying to get the overall shape, and then we can refine later. Did I grab the right ones? Yes, I did. Okay. Now, seeing as how the image plane is actually giving us a little bit of trouble, we're going to drop that down a bit. There we go. And don't be afraid to drop your image plane down. As long as you remember where you need it the most, you can always pull it back. When it comes to Maya, very little is permanent. Unless you save it, or you don't have infinite undos on, pretty much anything you do is reversible. Now, we are going to extend these out a bit, if for no other reason than to give us more thickness to the blade. Now, one thing I will point out is I'm keeping a pretty constant look on my poly counts. That's what all this information up here is. Breaks down your vertices, edges, polygons, triangles, and UVs. I'm gonna stretch that out a bit. Now you're probably noticing these endpoints are stretching out more. You can always go back. You can always go back and pull them in closer. Just wrangle them in. Bada boom, bada bing. Now, what else do we need to do? Well, looking at this, we got an overall shape for it. We need to pull these sides up a bit and create kind of a curve as best as possible, and then create kind of a curve along the top. And you're probably wondering how we're going to do that. As best as we can, really. So, we're going to go from here to here to there. Oh, you know what? Let's do it on this one. To back again. The exciting life of a 3D modeler. Okay. Gonna go one more go at it. Drop this in. And now we're going to pull you forward. Squeeze you in. And you're noticing we're getting some weird deformations over here. So, I was initially going to make these points. I'm now going to have them as these lower points. And you're about to find out why. Anytime the geometry doesn't do what it quote unquote is hoping to do, it will sometimes give you that. Basically, you're creating arguments within the geometry that represent themselves in, well, things like this. They're expecting, nice straight edges. And because you're not giving it that, it's doing it anyway. So, what we're going to do to get around that is we're going to break up this edge, which will in turn... Alright. Maya's fighting me. She's fighting me, but I think we got her. She's fighting me, but I think we got her. So, I'm just going to... Oh, don't want to get those off center. We're just going to add these in here, and then use these new points to start shaping up the actual curve to the sphere. And notice, this curve actually extends out a bit more, but we're going to worry about that in a minute. So, does not look like it's going to let me do that easily. So, we're just going to go bada boom, bada bing across here. Bam. Now that we've got that, we can start working on shaping these. We're going to add another line up through here, which will essentially allow us to give a little more of a line or a little more of a curve to it. Oh, actually, we want to go... Yeah, we'll do that. We're going to give us a little more of a curve to it. Oh, Maya, why must you fight me? But this would be why I'm not a teacher. I'm just a guy with a hobby. Guy with a hobby and a dream, actually. So, from this point, we're going to grab it. We're going to pull it in. Bada boom, bada bing. Got a bit of a more defined curve. Now, remember, we need to pull these sides in more. Technically, we could leave it here, but I like this curve, so we're going to work on that curve. And it gives us a nice little opportunity to show how we're going to do that. And if you're wondering how, well, if I were a YouTuber, I would probably play a clip of someone going, with science! Why? Because I don't know, I just like that. Anyway, we are going to grab here. And we're just going to pull this down. We're going to do that for both sides. Oh, actually, no. I completely messed that up. We want to grab here. And then pull that across. And now, we'll go ever so slightly through. I tell you, always fighting me. Okay. Now. Okay. I'm not completely sure as to why Maya is not responding the way she should be. There we go. Yeah, Maya gets weird sometimes, so be aware of that. Alright. Looks like Maya has done some weird things that we did not want her to do. So, simple thing, a little bit of cleanup. We'll get this over to there. Delete this. Okay. Now, we're going to pull these forward. Which will keep these out of the way when we do this. Draw them in a bit. And these, we can actually pull back and angle down a little. Or rather, angle inwards a little. Now, the only thing we really need to do now is go in and angle like an edge to it. Which really shouldn't be too hard. Cue the montage of this becoming ridiculously harder than it should be. Alright. So far, so good. It's all going according to plan. Everything's coming up Millhouse. And now we just got to do the same thing on the other side. So, flip this sucker over. Flip it like a flapjack. Okay. See, working in Maya is not the most difficult thing to do. You just have to be willing to try and experiment with it. It is, in all legitimacy, one of the better programs. Well, I'm a little biased simply because it's the only one that I've ever spent any real time in. But by accounts I've heard from many people, it is one of the better programs to use if you're looking to work with 3D. But for full disclosure, I am, yes, heavily biased. Quite biased. Super biased. Alright, now for this, all we gotta do, pull these faces up a bit, and yep, giving us some weirdness. But we can just go in and put in some weight reduction on these ends. See? Bam. That right there, pretty little spear. Now honestly, I'm gonna go in and do some cleanup on it. But yeah, by and large, that is pretty much what we plan to do. You know what? I'm here. I might as well do the cleanup now. Because it's not like anyone's going to object, right? Oh, you know what? I almost completely forgot the back end. Can't forget the back end. So, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup here, and then we'll get to the back end. Now, when I say cleanup, we really don't need all of this here. Quick and dirty way to take care of it. Simply because that is in the way. That has saved us on quite a bit of, well, save us a bit on poly count. There we go. Wonderful. Maybe not quite. Instead, I think we will combine these points. Oh, maybe get them a little closer. Then combine the points together. There we go. Now we got that nice hard edge for the spear. Flat sides to it. And wow, I have been forgetting all kinds of things. You know what I forgot? In all the excitement of making this blade, I forgot all about this. This little flare here. Yeah, I forgot all about it. You know what I need to do? I need to do that. I'm gonna do that. Yeah, I need to do that. So, First thing we're going to do, expand this point out. And this will be quick and simple. Nothing too major. It's not like it's going to take 50 minutes to do. We're going to do it quick, fast, and in a hurry. We're going to stretch both sides of these out, or rather widen both sides of this out, pretty much. I repeat words a lot. I'm not too good with the English. And now, just like before, at roughly the right arena. And you know what? We'll stretch down here out a bit too. Looks about right to me. And then from down here, we're just going to do the same thing we did before. First, we're going to kill these edges. Grab that. Pull this down. Alright, I'm not finding my handy dandy conversion icon. So, there we go. I'm gonna pull you down. Same thing. Yeah. At this point, I'm just sort of jumping back and forth haphazardly. I really do hate how that window pops in now. Oh, actually, no, I don't want to do that. First, I want to stretch this out. Now from here, you know what? I'm actually going to try and, round this out a bit. Just to give a little more differential look between the spear and the Naginata. Don't need them looking exactly alike. It's a minor difference, but you and I'll know. And that's all that matters. As long as we know, we don't need anyone else to know. And then from here, we're going to kick this sucker out one more time. Extrude out. And there we go. So I'm assuming this has been, what, an hour? Hour and a half maybe? We have been able to get a Naginata and a spear completely modeled out. I'm proud with that. I'm good with that. Out of the 4 weapons, I got half done. You know what? For me, I'm good with that. I'm happy with that. Now, you may work faster, you may work slower, but all in all, for this, I'm good with this. So, in the future, if you happen to like this, feel free to drop me a line, a comment, whatever, it's fine. But for me, I think I will be signing off until another day. Alright? Blood Saint is go. Well, actually, Blood Saint isn't a go. He's going. So I guess that would technically be Blood Saint is going. And now I'm just rambling. Anyway, you take it easy.